well.
32-12. Penrith demolished Souths, who had all the running for 20 minutes, and even with the rub of the green after that, probably never, ever felt like winning that game after
that's the thing.
25 minutes in this game.
This is scary because we've been talking all year about how Penrith can sort of, and they haven't really done it too much with a full-strength side, especially in a finals game, where Penrith, we've said they probably can have 20 minutes or so where they may be a bit off or something, and they certainly didn't have the rub of the green was going South Sydney's way even then, but Penrith have shown they can be off for a few minutes in a big finals game and still come back and do that.
So that's, you're going to be blunt about it. They were pretty horrible for 20 minutes.
They're
essentially
atrocious.
And they do the stats so I can tell you everything about this game.
Yeah, 32-12, 5 tries to 2, 5 out of 5 conversions played, 2 out of 2 for Souths, and 1 out of 1 penalty attempts for Penrith. 83% completion, played 72%, which was 36 out of 45 sets and 27 out of 37. 360-plus running metres for Penrith, 5 line breaks to 2, 41 tackle busts to 28, 5 offloads for Penrith, 14 for Souths, 3 forced dropouts from both teams, 0 40-20s, 364 tackles played, 335, 1 ruck infringement against Penrith, 2 inside the 10s against South Sydney, 5 penalties conceded to 4, 10 errors from both teams, a send-off for Souths. Martin made 40 tackles, Murray made 53, Brian Toto with 293 running metres, Isaiah Tass with 211. Leota missed 4 tackles, made 26. Walker missed 10 and made 15. And Latrell missed 4 and made 7.
Now, Penrith turned around. This is quite simple because you can pinpoint to the second when 1A Coruscant went on the field. He straightened them up. Yeah. He got them going properly. He would have been leading the forwards much better than, with all due respect to Mitch Kenny, was doing. Who, actually, in his defence, put on some nice hits. And
in his defence, he put on some real good hits.
He did, yes.
That was probably the best defensive game I think I've ever seen him play, to be honest.
A great game wherever he ended up floating around in between when Appy was on. But Coruscant straightened them up and fixed them. And
it's just that ball out in front and at the right time. It gets your players on the front foot. They're catching it while they're moving, rather than sort of waiting for a ball, getting held up, and then having to start once they catch it.
It's this trend that's in the game now, and it shits me to tears in some games because it happens with Appy, it happens with Harry Grant, where they try and protect him for 20 minutes. I understand the game's faster and they're not getting gas, but you can't tell me Appy wouldn't have held his own in the first 20.
No, absolutely not. Yeah.
Ollie, you're on a roll before I cut you off there.
Well, I just, as I said, we've said all year, and we've not really seen it in a finals game before for Penrith, but how they can probably be off, as they were pretty ordinary for that first 20 minutes, and if you were at least probably, I'd say, 12 other teams in the competition, that you're probably said and done for the night, but taking into account the 2 tries that they conceded as well. But for Penrith to not only come back, for it to be a preliminary final game against a hot team in South Sydney, an informed team, and be able to come back and do that, especially in the second half, let's just say, and it's definitely not impossible, but Parramatta have got a big challenge in front of them. But I thought what also kind of hampered South Sydney as well was that I don't think halftime could have come at a worse moment, because I feel like they actually stopping and allowing that adrenaline to go away and actually sitting for a bit, I think it played on their mind a bit more that they'd conceded those 2 late tries. And for Penrith, they would have been up in the sheds, thinking we can go on with this.
Absolutely.
And look, I'm not saying South Sydney do win if halftime wasn't immediately after the Brian Toto effort, but I just feel as though they might have been able to manage it a bit better for a bit longer if they were still out there. I feel like it didn't help for the game to be stopped, everything to be stopped, and then they got to come back on and try and reset again when Penrith was sort of
Actually, I disagree in that. I actually think what Penrith did well, how many times you see it all the time where a team fails to...
South should have scored 3 or 4 tries in that first half.
When teams fail to score against you after so long, how many times do the team then march upfield and score within 2 sets?
It was 18 or 22 to 6 at half time, which probably should have been.
Yeah. And then they did acknowledge, I believe, that the obstruction was an obstruction. I believe they said that the Tango try, the Luai run was shouldn't have been obstruction because there's no contact. But
there was nowhere near him.
No.
It was never going to affect anything.
Also, I think at least seeing it.
But they've called it all year, so...
Yeah, I've not seen it since, but it looked to me like Richie Kenner's arm went out before he got that ball down as well for South Sydney in the first half.
They never showed a single replay of that, which is interesting.
Yeah.
So it probably did. Because they've been...
That was a Staines try,
the coverage,
where they went to the right.
Yeah, it's changed Staines.
Yeah,
but the coverage has been very interesting in the last 3 weeks in terms of protecting the referees.
Finals, they haven't shown many replays at all.
Unless it's clear-cut, they don't show it. And, my God, there's been lots of smoke blown up referees' arseholes in the last 3 weeks.
Well,
Penrith probably bombed 2 tries and then had another 2 taken off
I would bet dollars to donut Captain... And good on him, he's allowed to. Captain Pete's had a tap on the shoulder to Foxtel and said, tell him to stop bagging the refs because there's been a noticeable change in how they've reacted to things at some points.
I think we can at least say this as well because some people were saying...
Especially so far out, and I've noticed it in the Ashley Klein games especially, and look who's refereeing this Sunday.
And well-deserved. But certain people saying that after the Parramatta game, of course, people with their theories and that are obviously wrong, saying, the NRL and the refs want to set up an all-Western Sydney grand final. All you need to do is watch the first 20 minutes of South Penrith, and that definitely was not the case because South Sydney did get, and it wasn't always wrong, but, yeah, it seemed a lot of the calls were. And for even longer, I'd more say the first 20 minutes because that's when South Sydney were up. But I'd say it probably continued at certain points throughout the game as well.
2 or 3 times during the match. It looks like they want South to win this game.
It looked like, and I'm not saying they did.
Honest,
I'm not saying they did, but I'll put it this way: they definitely weren't forcing an all Western Sydney grand final.
I do agree with that. At least 20 minutes in terms of even if Souths go to half time 12-6, I think they would have taken it. But
absolutely,
they half time. They needed half time by the time it came around. 1-0, I thought.
40 seconds to go. What the fuck are you doing trying to throw cutout passes to your centres when you're in front of the posts? Take the one. They kick off. You kick the fucking thing into touch and you go in at 13-6.
They had the shot there. They could have set up for a 2. Like, Latrell could have had a crack for 2 if they really, he'd pot him in his sleep.
Or just kick the thing over the sideline and go in at 12-6.
Yeah.
And then they go and throw a pressure pass to a bloke who's got busted ribs with a bloke right in front of him, and he fumbled it. The bloke had a fantastic... Campbell Graham had a fucking ripping game.
He's had a fantastic final.
And then he gets put under that kind of pressure.
He's not going to win finals player of the year, but he's been one of the best players in his final series.
And then Toto just screams down the sideline. Cody Walker comes across and just gets used as a speed bump by the smallest bloke on the field.
And takes out 2 other blokes. Yeah.
They could have stopped it 2 or 3 times on that try alone. And even the first one, Penrith didn't have to do a lot to get into position to score that first try either. It was South turning over ball after 25 or 30 minutes of being physically dominant. They were running through the middle of Penrith. There was the only bloke that I noticed in that pretty much that whole first half that was making a dent in the line was Toto on every second hit up out of his back end. Fish did it once or twice, but then when Leniu come on, he was really the only guy that was bending back the defence.
How fast is his... I don't know if leg split applies to props, but he
hits
the line
bloke
so
doesn't
hard.
get 40, 50 minutes every week.
But he just hits... When he comes on, his first hit up is always off the back fence.
Yeah, absolutely. He just screams into the fence. He's got no concern over his body, that's for sure. I think he just loves the contact. I think he's just one of those blokes that gets off on getting belted.
That's why I wanted to belt Tane Milne afterwards. Did you say, oh my God. And you could see when Leniu was going off, and they were obviously sort of holding him back a bit because he was mouthing off to Milne. You actually see when Leniu goes down, I'm not sure if they showed it on the coverage, but the South Sydney trainers actually had to push Milne back, and they looked and they waited until Leniu got into the Penrith sheds before letting him walk down.
Media, like someone was putting crap on Milne, and some South supporters jumped on and going, "Oh, he tried to take his head off. He's lucky they didn't let him go. He would have ripped his head off him, mate." I don't think he's belting Spencer Leniu, mate.
And it would have taken 12 blokes to get him apart.
And when Leniu was mouthing off to Milne looked like he did not want any of it.
Just see the look in his eye, man. I wouldn't want to go fucking anywhere near him.
I don't blame him or anything, but he was scared.
Fuck me.
Yes, and just for the record, that obviously was we all thought it was a send-off straight away.
Absolutely.
It was not pretty.
It was a massive swinging arm. It's back in the 80s type when the front rowers used to just do that every second tackle.
I think even Blocker said, mate, that would have been off.
But even then, they still would have got sent off back then. So
Penrith's attack, definitely struggled in that first half an hour.
I just want to wrap someone who we don't wrap all the time before you're going to get to. I thought Charlie Staines was quite good.
He was defensively as well.
He was. I've upgraded from shit Staines to skid marks. He was much better.
I don't think
this week. I thought every run counted, and his defence was. He was on the spot every time. I thought
he was under the high
I was
ball.
actually impressed by him in this game. So
as I said, I thought the Penrith's attack was definitely off for 20 to 30 minutes in this game, and it's probably they've played 2 games of footy in 5-6 weeks, so it's definitely something into that. And Para would be a bit worried about the way that they came home in this game, but to me it looked like the ball movement was slow out of dummy half, which doesn't help, but there was too many blokes trying to run too many different angles at too many different times, and it was confusing the playmakers, and they were sort of stopping and starting on their runs, cutting in and out, and then when they settled down and they just started hitting their one-out lines, you had your back rowers running the straight lines and then maybe one guy running an angle. The ball movement got faster, but the players' frantic movements weren't there, so it just everything picked up, and as you said, it came off the back of Appy getting blokes on the front foot, and they got that roll back through the middle of the field, and they mentioned that the push pass for Tato to score there. I think if it goes in at 12-6, you've probably got a whole different second half, to be honest. I still think Penrith win and probably still win pretty comfortably at the end of the game, but I don't think it's as one-sided in that second half. I think South's come out and put out probably another good 20 minutes instead of just coming out. They were flat. They were gone at half-time, as you mentioned. I think they realised that they'd blown their opportunities early, and they were going to get run down. They're just waiting to see when it was going to happen and how it was going to happen. But
look, you could see in that the back end, just Cam Murray's energy is sort of a reflection of the team, and he was gassed in the back end of that first half, and then a non-entity in a set. Like his ball playing was fantastic. His tackling, his defence was great. Dylan went down, but he was not by any means absolute peak. Cam Murray, and you could probably use a World Cup off, to be honest, but he won't let anyone down there either.
And that way Appy got out of dummy half for the first try and turned Latrell inside out. I would love that. That was fantastic. Yeah. His foot movement, and he's quick out of dummy half. I think he's a lot quicker than people expect when he gets out.
But I think it's also his reading. Like, he just picks the right time to do so. Like, you look, if you're smart, you can look quicker when you can pick space.
In second half, Penrith were just clinical. They went straight at Campbell Graham. Obviously, bloke's got busted ribs. They made him work his ass out. They went to Cody Walker on the other side of the field and just ran directly at him and Ilias. They just worked over the same spots on the field. And if you go and have a look at where all the tries were scored, it was in those 3 positions. It was just straight over the top of those guys consistently. They'd go to one side of the field, they'd come back, hit the other side twice, and then they'd go back again at Walker. And Walker's defence was fucking deplorable. I know he's not the best defender in the game, but he was bad in this game. He was jumper grabbing and just out of position in defence a lot. They kicked smart to the corners, made Latrell run from one side of the field to the other every time. Like, it never went straight to Latrell. He wasn't able to stand there and catch it. He'd had to run 10 or 15 minutes to go and pick it up. And, they obviously gassed him out towards the back end of the game. I was surprised with his involvement on the line. He's
non-existent?
Yeah, well, most of the season, every time they're within that 20-metre line, he's involved in at least 2 plays, like to either try and set someone up or run himself. And I think there was 3 or 4 times he threw a half-decent pass, and that was about it.
We talk about him getting frustrated, right? And it wasn't sort of in the traditional sense where he starts putting shots on and that. And I'm not sure if you guys noticed it at all. You could see it on TV a couple of times, like when he'd put a kick away or do something. It seemed to always be off the back of something Dylan Edwards did, and you could just hear him go. And it just got more consistent sort of towards the end of the... And it always seemed to be when Edwards would get the ball off a kick and run for 20 or 30 metres or something, it seemed to really be getting to him. And it wasn't necessarily his fault that he was able to... I think he was just getting frustrated with his defence a bit, to be honest. And
well, on Edwards...
just last thing, it's when you put the game together as a whole, early on in the game, Cleary did a lot of weird kicks that didn't make sense at the time, but when you piece it all together... Like, I think twice he just chipped over the line in behind. It was a nothing. Yeah. You think it nothing kick. But you look at the fact he's had to make Latrell run 20 metres to pick it up on a nothing kick. And then he's done the same thing the other side. It's just, when you piece together 80 minutes, it's very, very clever to gas the bloke. But yeah, get to Dylan because he was an absolute star in this game.
His positioning at fullback in attack and defence is probably close to the best that there is out there.
Yeah.
The way he, even on the shit runs he's taken out of dummy half, he very rarely do you see him get hit squarely in the chest and driven back. Like he's always on someone's inside or outside shoulder, and he sort of makes them half miss, and if they don't half miss, they miss him completely, and he's out the other side of the line, and then someone else has to get in. Like he doesn't have that highlight reel where he beats 7 blokes and goes and scores, but he's always half beaten someone, or he'll beat 2 blokes and then make 20 metres, and then off the back of that, the highlight comes up after that, and he just does not get anywhere near as much attention as he should.
I reckon if you go to watch the 10 best long distance tries, they put them on YouTube these days, of Penrith in 2022, he would have started all of them.
Yeah.
Through that, because he gets that half break, which turns into all of a sudden he's got the 30, and gets a quick play the ball, which either gets a penalty or has someone there scooting straight through, who's another 40, and all of a sudden you got Cleary run 30 metres, hit the ball on the full, and he's either running or he's got everyone around him to move the ball around.
Who was it who scored? I think it was the play after he got the ball off the kick and ran about 40 metres.
Tungo, I think.
Yeah, because for that try, like when he did that, I think that's actually when I noticed Latrell go like that, because was he the one who put the kick in? I'm not sure, but there's like 2 South Sydney defenders like standing right there about 20, and they're there the whole time waiting for him to go get the ball, and you think, okay, he'll run up, they'll tackle him, whatever. He just blitzed them, and then I think that's when Latrell, oh fuck,
and then bumped off another one and ran back
just
infield.
Like it was crazy, because it was like, well, there's literally two blokes standing right here. They've not had to jog over. They're there right now while he's still leaning over to pick up the ball.
I don't think I've ever seen the bloke tired. Like
boom.
he's obviously the fittest bloke they got, and for the size of him, he's tough as nails. He played last year with a broken ankle or whatever it was, broken foot.
And even just his ability to get out of the in goal. Not many fullbacks are as good as him. Just sneaking the ball into play.
But it all starts with just being in the right spot.
Right.
You know, he's always within 5 or 10 metres of where the ball is. Like he's never, you never go, oh fuck, where's Penrith's fullback when a kick goes through? Yeah. He's always sniffing around somewhere. He's always close. It's he doesn't get anywhere near as many raps as he should.
I think he's starting to.
Yeah, he definitely is. Yeah, he's starting to get a lot more notoriety. I thought Tass and Graham were good for Souths in the back line. They were probably the only 2 that looked likely for the majority of the game. Cook was okay. So was.
Look, even, I hate to say this, but even Kenner's positional play, they actually missed Johnston at times, because he was probably 2 strides in front of where Johnston takes one of those cutouts and maybe runs away. Not saying he would have, but he was just that bit keen.
And he doesn't have that acceleration either, so he probably can't start
2 or 3
that bit
occasions.
deeper.
There's at least, if it's not a try, there's meters they could have gained early on that game.
It was sort of for that reason. I personally thought they probably should have gone with it's Isaac Thompson, isn't it? Because he seems a lot more like, I'm not saying he is like Alex Johnson, but a lot more similar, and probably could have filled into that a bit better than Kenner.
Yeah.
But, Cooks, I thought Saleh was actually really good as well, coming off the bench for Souths. And Murray and Keon, they've been their best players pretty much 90% of the season. They just do it every week.
I thought they missed a couple of times.
again was really good, I thought.
Yeah, there's a couple of times you're waiting for him to have that big upright run him, and he didn't really take him a lot in this game.
Yeah, but they didn't just really seem to play.
Yeah, I don't know what they were
after that first sort of, when Walker's try, let's face it, was a lucky try.
Yeah.
Like that could have been grounded by Penrith and whatever. And then there was the try to the corner. There was never really any sort of interchange of play in and around the post or on the edges of the ruck that made Penrith have to sort of stretch. Penrith just, like, they're the best defensive team in the comp for a reason, but you got to throw more at them than what South threw at them to be able to break them open. And I thought they were easily the best for Souths. Brian Tyler was fantastic again. If I could back up to 300 metres, just the bloke's a little beast, and he'll be missed if he does end up leaving Penrith. I mentioned Lenu. I thought he was fantastic coming off the bench. I don't know if he may move on in the future just to try and secure himself a starting spot, in a bigger contract somewhere else, but. I think he probably deserves a few more minutes. Fish was fantastic.
Didn't he just resign for not like? Was he one of the blokes that took the smaller contract?
He took a pay. He got an offer from Melbourne at the end of 2020 that was more money than what Penrith were offering him, and he
decided to
stayed
stay.
at
I think he
Penrith.
signed for 2 years, so
Yeah,
next
year.
after next year maybe he might be moving on. But I thought Fish was fantastic again. Liam Martin was really good,
yeah.
especially with his ball running. I'm gonna have a couple of dollars on him, I think, for Churchill next week. To be honest,
Martin?
I think, yeah.
Well, he
if
chose the right time
if
to
he
stand
jags
up.
a try, and
Yeah,
he's
Sim
always
Cleary's
hits
like
in defence
the
and all the
$1.80,
rest of
so.
it. But yeah, that's why I'll be looking to sniff it around somewhere else. Yo was fantastic again. It's just so hard to read. They don't know when he's going to pass and when he's going to run, and he makes an impact when he does both of them. But Cleary and Edwards were the two standout players by a mile.
Well,
I love the way Cleary, when the game needs someone to take control, he just I know there's all the knockers. He doesn't do it in Origin and all the rest of it. He's done it a couple of times, but he probably doesn't do it enough in Origin. But he's got a whole heap of different players around him as well, and it's a whole different type of game. But when Penrith are getting close to finishing a game off, he just... The way he most of the time he scores himself.
He always scores a
fucking
try
runs and
at the end of like a
scores
finals
a
game.
little
Yeah.
grubber, or he steps inside someone and he's like, "Yep, that's the end of the game. Fuck yous, I'm going."
And you know what it is? It's always that style of grubber for yourself that you used to do in the playground after the bell. You go, and the smart ass, most talented kid in the field go, "Oh, just square it."
But just watching it as well, it seemed like he had the ball. He went left, he went right, he looked, and he ended up
It's,
just.
oh,
He
fuck,
went,
I gotta do it myself.
bullshit. And he just went. Someone else as well, and I've mentioned him a couple of times this year, and we're pretty much mentioning the whole Penrith squad at this point, but Scott Sorensen has been so good for Penrith coming off of the bench.
Perfect bench
in
player.
terms of like a replacement for Kikau, I saw people saying that Penrith have signed young Zach Hosking from Brisbane, and they said it would be between Hosking and someone else to take over Kikau's role. I think it should be Scott Sorensen.
I don't know if he's got the meters.
well,
I don't know if he's got the minutes in him anymore. But
Well, maybe that's something they can try and see, and maybe that's why not. But coming off the bench this year, he's been amazing. And
I loved him at the Sharks. I was devastated when he left, and he was probably close to our best back rower when he was there. I was just, he'd only have probably 12 months left in him, I would imagine.
How old is he?
He'd be 34, 30.
I always had him
34.
in my head. Tolman and him were always the same age, so I don't know what that means, and I'm probably wrong.
Because
Google too.
He actually left the Sharks under the... He said he was going to retire because he'd had enough and his body was done. And then 6 months or a couple of months later, he popped up and signed with Panthers. But
I think I think they just said, "Oh, there's someone we can get," and at the time would have just covered for Origin.
It was like
essentially.
Kurt Capewell the year
just a
before.
fella. Yeah,
he just doesn't make mistakes. He just does his job. Fucking tackles well, hits a line really well, and he's got pretty good footwork for. He's not the biggest forward, but he's got decent footwork. Yeah,
29.
He's only 29.
Oh, well,
29. Well, that's older than I would have thought.
but it's enough for another contract.
Well, he might have 2 or 3 years left.
I think he's at least there next year.
If he's 29,
If he's happy making
probably,
300, 250, doing what he's doing there, why wouldn't you? Why would you retire? Paid you 32 and
got a starting spot.
And then when eventually maybe he's not as good and they drop him to reserve grade, he can win that comp.